Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah! Welcome to another installment of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and I think everyone should check out the 40-minute video summary by The Bulwark on its interviews with all of Michigan's, three Democratic Senate nominees, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, and Haley Stevens. And I'll post the video along with some of my written thoughts on that interview on Left of Lansing's Patreon page. And I think they each, I just want to say this right now, I think they each had some, solid moments, but I don't think you'll be surprised that I concluded that progressive Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed had the more consistent performance, answers, and message, but it still was very insightful because it wasn't really a debate. It appears that they were interviewed separately, so that kind of allowed them more time to expand on questions and giving some more nuanced answers revolving around healthcare, the auto industry, and the nation's debt. So by Thursday afternoon, here on June 11th, I'll post that video with some written thoughts on Left of Lansing's Patreon page. And please sign up on Left of Lansing's Patreon page for free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just free. Another place where you can check out some of my ideas, some of my thoughts, some of my ramblings that maybe I don't really share here, okay? Oh, and also, you'll want to vote on this week's Left of Lansing a web poll, which I'll introduce later on today's show. Okay, this is Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and I haven't hid my preference for Michigan's Senate race, and it's definitely not MAGA Republican and Trump waterboy Florida Mike Rogers, but it's also not Democratic Congresswoman Miss AIPAC Haley Stevens. And Haley did not get the best news as of this recording on Thursday morning, June 11th. Punchbowl News reports that Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is publicly endorsing AIPAC Haley Stevens. Okay, yeah, not a surprise. Schumer said that he believes that Stevens has the best chance to winning, even though recent polls, of course, show that Dr. Abdul is defeating Florida Mike Rogers in a state that is very angry with the Trump regime. Stevens refuses to say so far if she'll support Schumer to be the Democratic leader in the Senate if she wins, but she has said that she believes that Chuck has done a pretty good job. His poll ratings are abysmal in his own state of New York, and he, of course, is part of the reason why MAGA fascism rose to power here in this country. And, of course, Chuck Schumer believes throwing more money towards Israel is one of his main jobs. Now, I know I played this clip for you in past shows, including last weekend, but it must be repeated.
And in the United States Congress, I will continue to fight for the people of Israel. I will continue to fight for Israel's existence. Israel comes to me in my dreams. I see Israel's future, and I know that Israel will continue to exist for the Jewish people.
That was a video posted by AIPAC Tracker. They're the ones who did the cha-ching there. That was Michigan Democratic Congresswoman, the establishment Democratic Party's choice in Michigan's U.S. Senate race, Haley Stevens, speaking at a Hanukkah ceremony in Detroit a couple of years ago. And you know what? I really think that must be played as much as possible. And frankly, it's a line that the progressive candidate who's leading, again, in the Democratic Senate primary race, according to the polls, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, it's something that maybe his campaign must put out there as much as possible so that way older voters who get their news on TV are seeing it. I believe it's really those of us who are on social media, probably Gen X and younger, well, maybe baby boomers too. They have seen that clip, but I don't think enough have. It's well known that Haley Stevens covets and publicizes the fact that she gets lots of AIPAC cash. That's why Haley Stevens refuses to call out Israel's right-wing genocidal government and remains complicit in being part of the uniparty in Congress that votes to give away our tax dollars, the working class tax dollars, for Israel's war efforts. But Israel comes to Haley Stevens in her dreams. Again, who talks like that? According to Iran War Tracker, Trump's and Israel's war on Iran will have now costed taxpayers over $107 billion, nearly $110 billion. And shockingly, despite promises of grand deals and grand bargains from our dear leader Trump, Bibi Netanyahu and Israel continue doing whatever they want to do by committing more war crimes in Lebanon and being hostile with Iran. Dear leader Trump said nearly 40 times that we're close to a deal in Iran, but we're not. We're not close to a deal because Israel will never allow a deal to happen. And both Israel and Iran continue lobbing bombs at each other. And why wouldn't Iran fight back since they're constantly being attacked? And Iran can't take the United States word anymore since dear leader ripped up President Obama's Iran nuclear deal, which is Obama's finest foreign policy achievement in a foreign policy that, let's be honest, was average at best for him. And guess who was against the Iran nuclear deal? Several Democrats, including, Chuck Schumer, many of whom bought and paid for by AIPAC. Yet, here's Haley Stevens saying she sees Israel coming to her in her dreams, while deficits and debt in this country continue rising as we fund all of these wars overseas. You know, for once, and I know this could be radical and extreme thinking, but for once I'd love to have a senator in this state who will fight for Michigan, who will fight for the working class in Michigan, and not for Israel and Israel's extreme genocidal government. For once, I'd just love to have a senator who will fight for the working class in Michigan on all fronts. And I think that's why the United Auto Workers announcement last week that it was backing the progressive Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed was a literal gut punch to the Haley Stevens campaign. The UAW views Dr. Abdul presenting a coherent working class message. And according to the UAW's own endorsement, it read, UAW members in Michigan want a fighter in Washington, D.C. who isn't afraid to push forward a strong working class agenda with moral clarity. Having never taken a dime from corporate PACs, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed is someone that we could trust to have our backs, including when we need it most, like come May 2028. From Medicare for All to banning stock buybacks, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed is ready, eager, and well-equipped to move our core issues in the U.S. Senate. You know, banning stock buybacks and getting mired into financialization during the 1990s and the 2000s, and that's what led the auto industry becoming lost and near extinct when the Great Recession market crash hit back in the late aughts. And of course, as we know, she's talked about it for many years, Haley Stevens worked with the Obama administration on bailing out the big three. And that's what it was. It was a bailout. Auto rescue makes it sound like they got hit by something that they couldn't foresee. They all could foresee it. It was a bailout. And it's one that had to happen. One that I said when I was on the radio during my radio days, I said, yes, we have to back this bailout for the auto industry. We can't do as Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney said back in, I think, like 2011 or 2012, when he proposed that we should just let a complete collapse of the auto industry happen in Detroit. We couldn't do that because that would have destroyed the state of Michigan, and it would have destroyed many other states too, but especially Detroit. But the UAW still refused to back Haley Stevens, despite her work with the Obama team on bailing out the auto industry and saving union jobs. And I'm guessing here that perhaps the big reason the UAW backed Dr. Abdul over Haley Stevens is twofold. One, they needed someone to fight for them now and in the future instead of highlighting something that they played a role in doing some 20 years ago. And second, they see Dr. Abdul's message resonating with voters across the state. With voters, working class voters. I think they want to stick with the winner. It's interesting how in the UAW statement, it mentioned Dr. Abdul's push to get the United States in becoming a Medicare for all country. And I say that because I believe some opponents in the Democratic Party race have argued that we shouldn't really push for Medicare for all, since that'll hurt already agreed to health benefits that the unions fought to get. That's why they only push for a public option. But Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed is pushing a guarantee that every living person in the United States has some kind of health care coverage. If they want to rely more on private insurance or use private insurance as a supplement, fine, but every working class American should have coverage from day one. And that's a popular position to take. Most voters in the United States agree with that position. And as we see with Detroit's Big Three canceling plans for EV cars for a myriad of reasons after receiving billions in tax cuts, and we see workers still struggling in today's economy, the UAW is saying that they need a bold vision like Abdul, a vision that's working class focused. and a vision that is resonating with millions. Again, the UAW is supporting Dr. Abdul because he wants to concentrate on Michigan. He sees Michigan in his dreams. A new poll came out this week showing Dr. Abdul al-Sayed, as I said earlier, leading the presumptive MAGA Republican nominee, Florida Mike Rogers, by 5 points. According to a poll by, I think it's Tolkien Research, Abdul leads Rogers 46-41, and once voters learn about the policies of both candidates, according to the pollster, Abdul's lead increases by 10%. Now, I'll still wait on some other polling, especially within Michigan, since it's speculated this could have been an internal poll for Dr. Abdul. However, it is the second poll showing Dr. Abdul leading Mike Rogers, which is also interesting given that many corporate establishment figures said that Democratic voters could not back Dr. Abdul since he will not defeat Mike Rogers. That narrative is blowing up. Polls a couple of months ago showed Dr. Abdul losing to Florida Mike Rogers, and there was a lot of pearl clutching on how Dr. Abdul was going to cost a Michigan Senate seat if he won the primary. Now, he's leading, or at least is neck and neck with Florida Mike Rogers. And Florida Mike Rogers got his own troubles, all right? We haven't really focused on Florida Mike a whole lot, but he's got his own troubles by saying that he backs Trump and Israel's war in Iran, for instance, and that we've got enough oil here. So everybody just chill out, relax. Florida Mike also doesn't think working-class Michiganders will really care about how the Trump regime's tariffs are hurting them, saying, oh my gosh, coffee went up, horror. Yeah, that's an actual quote from Florida Mike Rogers. I don't know about you, but I'm going to postulate that Florida Mike Rogers' Just Relax campaign isn't going to work. I could be wrong. Still, you've got some corporate establishment types in the Democratic Party, both here in the state and nationally, who are simply upset that all these progressive populists are gaining voters and gaining steam and, yes, winning elections. They're mad because they're losing their jobs. That's what I think you're seeing in this corporate establishment, donor class and consulting class. They see progressive populists winning. They see progressive populists gaining the attention of longtime Democratic voters, but also independent voters. And it's scaring the hell out of them. And they're mad because they believe it will cost them their own cushy jobs within party politics, especially those awful party consultants that get cushy pundit jobs on cable news. I mean, just look how some of them tried to bury Dr. Abdul's campaign from the very beginning, or William Lawrence's campaign in Alyssa Sotkin's old district, or Aisha Faruqi's campaign in Michigan's 11th district. That's Haley Stevens' current district, by the way, and also Kyle Blomquist and his campaign up in the UP. You see, the corporate establishment is angry, and they are afraid not of MAGA fascism. Now, that doesn't worry them one bit. They're not worried about corporate authoritarianism. I mean, come on, they work with them. They want their donor money. And they're apparently not afraid of white Christian nationalism taking over this country as well. They're more afraid that the working class is now onto their game. And their game was do very little to keep the gravy train a-coming. Good friend of this podcast, Jared Yates Sexton from Dispatches of a Collapsing State, wrote this week about comfort of the cage, why America chooses complicity over accountability. And Jared Yates Sexton writes the following, and it's something that I think is ringing true with millions of working class voters, including those here in Michigan. And just bear with me, that's just 3 paragraphs long, but listen. The establishment functions not as an adversarial force to extremism, but as its manager. Their role is to stabilize the status quo just enough to prevent a total collapse, offering minor concessions, a new federal holiday here, a symbolic gesture there, to quiet the demands for structural overhaul. They barter away the lives of the most vulnerable, transgender youth, immigrants, black and brown communities, women, under the guise of electoral pragmatism. We hear the same recurring promise. We want to address your suffering, but we can't right now. Just wait until the next election cycle. This is the warm bath of complicity. It allows people to feel safe inside the machine, even when that machine is actively rolling over the bodies of those demanding real justice. If your political strategy requires sacrificing the most targeted groups for the sake of institutional comfort, you are not an ally. You are an administrator of the decline. You know, if I didn't know better, I think that Jared Yates Sexton knows a little Pink Floyd. His line, this is the warm bath of complicity. It allows people to feel safe inside the machine. For me, it just kind of harkened back to Pink Floyd's Welcome to the Machine. And that line that they say in the song, it goes, "What did you dream? It's all right. We told you what to dream." While I was driving with my wife from mid-Michigan to southeastern Ohio, and then to D.C., and then through central and western Pennsylvania over the weekend, which I'll talk more about in the next segment, I was trying to figure out just why so many establishment Democratic figures are fighting harder to destroy and defeat progressives than they are at defeating MAGA Republicans. I mean, all I've heard since Dear Leader won back in 2016 is how he's the worst president of all time, and how he's a threat to our democracy, and how he's a threat to our American way of life. But then they don't want to put up any real opposition, or worse, present a different vision for the country, a real working class opposition, a vision that moves the Overton window. More on that in a moment. You're listening to LOL.
Bringing progressivism with passion each and every week. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'd also like to thank Audio Boom for publishing the show and helping us spread our populist, progressive, and patriotic message. Speaking of which, let's get back to the show with Pat.
leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. Visit the Left of Lansing Patreon page to sign up for some of the content that you cannot get here on the podcast, which I talked about in the last segment. Also, visit Left of Lansing's YouTube page and subscribe there as well. Subscriptions mean a lot to us. All right, coming up next week, progressive Democratic State Senate candidate for Michigan's 38th Senate District up in the Upper Peninsula, I said up in the Upper Peninsula, is Kelly Van Ginhoven. Kelly has been running a solid grassroots campaign up there, despite many of the establishment not giving her campaign much help to begin with. The establishment, the machine, was already going against Kelly Van Ginhoven, but like she did when she helped take down the MAGA chair of the Delta County Board a few years ago, and where she has maintained her county board seat, Kelly is just charging ahead, and I'm not surprised one bit by all the endorsement that she's getting, not only from several statewide organizations, but especially from those in her area. She has always fought for those in her area, and the people notice that. Kelly Van Ginhoven will be on next week to share her story and why she's running for the working class in the Upper Peninsula. We were supposed to have Progressive State Representative Betsy Kafia of Traverse City on the show this week, but something came up. Logistics just didn't work out, and we couldn't have her on this week. But Representative Kafia and her office say that she will be on sometime within the next 2 weeks. And I am looking forward to that talk because she's got a lot to talk about, including her work on making Michigan a more transparent state and on the Mop-Up Michigan Ballot Initiative, which, if approved, would give we, the voters, a chance to ban the public utilities such as DTE and Consumers Energy from making political contributions. That would be huge. Also, Betsy Kafia won in a red area by being moderate. Oh, wait, hold on. No, I'm being told that's incorrect. Oh, that's right. Betsy Kafia won by being a progressive populist, a common sense politician who backs up her claims of being for the working class by actually getting stuff done for the working class in her district. So Betsy Kafia will be on sometime within the next couple of weeks. So I was talking about Jared Yates Sexton from the Dispatches from a Collapsing State and his take on that establishment figures believe that their main job is to manage fascism, is to manage the chaos, but do little to reverse that chaos and state of suffering that many in the working class are feeling. And this part really reached me where he wrote, and I'll repeat here, he said, they, meaning the establishment, barter away the lives of the most vulnerable, transgender youth, immigrants, black and brown communities, women, under the guise of electoral pragmatism. We hear the same recurring promise. We want to address your suffering, but we just can't right now. Wait until the next election cycle. Now, how many times did we hear from corporate establishment figures after the 2024 election that we had to throw away and toss aside transgender Americans, especially transgender youth? We all heard it. So many out there were saying it was the Democratic Party's support of transgender youth as to why we lost this election. When did the Democrats really put up any kind of real full defense for transgender youth and all transgender Americans. There was this belief that transgender Americans, I'm still flabbergasted that there was this belief that transgender Americans were the reason for the Democrats' demise, but I never really believed that since, again, Democrats never really offered much defense for transgender youth or for transgender Americans during the election in 2024. But I also think transgender Americans were a nice scapegoat for the Democratic Party leadership's role in helping Israel's right-wing government commit genocide. You see, the Democratic Party leadership wants us to focus on transgender Americans, not on the money and the arms that we're giving to Israel. And how a majority in Congress, a majority of Democrats in Congress are against the Democratic Party base when it comes to Israel. And considering how Trump won Michigan, where every vote counts, losing the Arab American vote proved to be costly. If you want to understand why corporate establishment Democrats are feeling like they are losing control of a party apparatus that they've held since, well, I guess since 1992, it's because they forgot who they were representing. They're supposed to be representing the entire working class. Sure, there may be some differences within the classes, but to the billionaire Epstein class, we are all the same. And that's what the corporate establishment class is not getting one bit. And they're learning hard lessons now here in Michigan and across the country. Like in Maine, so many establishment figures hoped that negative stories of the populist candidate Graham Plattner would derail his campaign in the 11th hour just before Maine's primary. I guess what they dreamed of happening would be that Plattner would drop out of the race, and thereby a more establishment figure could come in and save the day. But he didn't drop out of the race, because in the age of Trump and in the age of complete hypocrisy by many in the political and corporate political media worlds, the working class are on to their games. Plattner didn't drop out of the race. He shouldn't have, of course, and he ended up winning Maine's primary race in blowout fashion this week. His message is connecting with the working class in Maine. But it's telling to me, seeing how many Democratic Party establishment figures who are aided and abetted by many in corporate media attack Graham Plattner over the week, essentially signaling that they'd rather have Republican senior citizen Senator Susan Collins win re-election over Graham Plattner. Graham Plattner ran an ad in Maine this week after his primary victory. Here it was.
Some of the most powerful Democrats and Republicans in the country were on Epstein Island. It seems the only thing the party establishments can agree on is a love of Jeffrey Epstein and a hatred of me. I'm Graham Plattner, and I approve this message because together we will take back our government from the Epstein class.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we are as a country. You're either part of the Epstein class or you're not. And those who are part of that class, well, they are losing. And the Epstein class isn't just about those billionaires and political elites like dear leader Howard Lutnick and Bill Clinton. It's also those who work to put those in the Epstein class in some good light. These billionaires, like the Ellison family, gobble up media companies so that way they can present their side, and their side only. So they put up the most incapable and unqualified woman in charge, and I'm talking about Bari Weiss, to make CBS and to make CNN more corporate authoritarian friendly. Because to these billionaires, it's just money to them. So what if they lose money on these media ventures? They don't care. Their job is to bury the news. And good for them that they've got somebody like Bari Weiss, who's a foot soldier, to do just that for them. And their job is to tell you that the Iran war is good. Tax cuts for billionaire tech bros and the rest of the Epstein class are good. Data centers are good, even though AI technology isn't turning out to be some perfect model to replace humans. And they'll tell you that we must give Israel whatever it wants. Last week, Detroit Progressive Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib introduced a war powers resolution limiting the Trump regime's involvement in Israel's war on Lebanon. But Democratic Party leaders in the House joined Republicans in blocking that amendment from passing. Of course they did. Debbie Dingell from Ann Arbor was the only Democratic congresswoman in Michigan to vote for that bill. Her other Democratic colleagues, Sri Thanadar of Detroit, Hillary Skolton of Grand Rapids, Kristen McDonald-Rivet of Bay City, and yes, Haley Stevens of Royal Oak, all voted against Rashida Tlaib, and they voted with the Trump regime. Imagine that. They tell us all the time that Trump is the worst of the worst and a horrible man. And some of them will even hint that they're mildly disgusted by his associations with Jeffrey Epstein, or how there's allegations against Trump in the Epstein files of him with a teenager. Yet, they'll quickly turn around and say they trust Donald Trump more when it comes to his and Israel's war on Iran and also Lebanon. That's what I'm talking about when I say the uniparty. You'll hear some of them say how they care about this country's debt and deficits, but then have no problem at all spending hundreds of billions of dollars on Middle Eastern wars. The working class in Michigan and across the country, hey, look, they're getting it, and they're sick of getting left behind, and they're sick of being unheard. We learned this week that the Consumer Price Index rose to 4.2% this week, and energy prices spiked by 3.9%. Now, I believe a lot of us, right, we kind of remember being told last year that we had to vote for Dear Leader Trump because he would end inflation on day one. Of course, that would mean deflation if we got rid of inflation altogether, but I digress. I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden. I'm not a big Biden defender, especially on Israel, but the inflation rate during his final month in office was 3%. Trump's is now at 4.2%. Like when he said that there'd be no new wars under his stewardship, Dear Leader also lied when he said that he controlled inflation. Now, anybody with half a brain knew that was never going to be the case, and again, I like to see how Republican Senate candidate Florida Mike Rogers is going to defend Dear Leader's economic record. It'll be a treat, or any MAGA Republican for that matter. Oh, and here was Dear Leader this week when asked about the high inflation numbers. Listen.
No, I love it. The numbers were great. You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
I love the inflation. I love the inflation. I love the inflation. I'm surprised he didn't say it's perfect inflation, flawless inflation. Oh, and inflation is also erasing all wage gains, too. Feeling good about this war in Iran, everyone? Dear Leader doesn't care, which is why he and his family and those around him continue to use their government positions to enrich themselves while screwing over the working class. They hope that you won't care about the corruption. They hope that you'll blame transgender Americans for everything. Now, getting back here to Michigan, thanks to some fantastic reporting by the Detroit News' Beth LeBlanc, and I think this really speaks to the divide here that we've got between the elites and the working class. 41 former Michigan lawmakers or their spouses are receiving over $100,000 per year, even though they've been out of office for decades. And that's because of an old pension system that was eliminated in 1997. But those who were there before 1997, they get to benefit from this pension system. And in order to keep this pension funded, more taxpayer money is needed. Listen to this from Beth LeBlanc's story. She says the number of former lawmakers earning more than $100K annually in retirement has ballooned because of a guaranteed 4% annual cost of living increase built into the pension. So inflation is causing this pension to increase. Nice. Beth LeBlanc also says that the annual pension for former Governor John Engler has doubled since he started drawing from it some 27 years ago. By comparison, writes LeBlanc, Social Security checks increased an average of just 2.6% over the last quarter of a century. Now, look, I'm not just picking on Republicans, since this list also includes several Democrats as well. But allow me to read this quote from Dick Posthumous, whom some of you might be old enough to remember lost to Democrat Jennifer Granholm in that gubernatorial race in the early aughts. But in trying to justify this pension, Dick Posthumous, the Republican, said, "These are leaders who dedicated their lives and probably would have been leaders in another sector otherwise and likely would have gotten something similar." Isn't that something? Wow, Dick, that's interesting. These are the same people who spent their entire careers ending pensions and arguing for why we need to slash working class programs like food stamps and Medicaid, why we had to make this a right to work for less state. But then at the same time, they were collecting a comfy government pension from our tax dollars because in their view, they deserved it. Look, I'm not against some kind of pension for those in state office because, look, without it, we'd have nothing but millionaires in office, so I'm fine with some kind of a pension. But it's just funny how the rich and the connected always feel like they're deserved of certain advantages that they're deserved of certain advantages that they spend their careers ripping away from the rest of the working class. Isn't that funny? That's why the Mop Up Michigan initiative at least serves as a start to level this playing field just a little bit, which is run by corporate behemoths such as DTE, Consumers Energy, and the insurance lobby. The Mop Up Michigan initiative came in with over 500,000 petition signatures because the working class of all political stripes and walks of life are tired of being ignored and are tired. They are just tired of the constant hypocrisy by those in the elite donor classes. And once that gets on the ballot and they see how easy it passes, trust me, that will be another shockwave and another gut punch to the political establishment. Governor Gretchen Whitmer's palling around with OpenAI's Sam Altman during the groundbreaking at that hyperscale AI data center in Saline Township, and that showed us how the Uniparty is operating in favor of the billionaire tech bros. The same tech bros, mind you, who want to destroy democracy. Now, some Democrats in the state Senate want to pass a bill that would just put a little pause on building these data centers, just so that way we can grapple exactly what we're dealing with here. But Whitmer says she'd veto such a bill. Look, I disagree a lot with Democratic consultant and strategist Rachel Bitkofer because she's always believing that progressives will hurt the Democratic Party, a.k.a. hurting her future employment, which I can understand, though, being afraid living in the Trump economy. But Rachel correctly noted on Twitter this week that she's advising her clients to wedge the hell out of data centers against Republicans, especially in races they need Republican votes to win. And Rachel Bitkofer was responding to a story which she said in Ohio, Amazon, Meta, and Google all signed agreements between 2014 and 2018 that granted them 100% sales tax exemptions, listen, for up to 40 years on any facility built in Ohio if the companies invested a certain amount of money in the cash. If the companies invested a certain amount of money in the state. So Ohio won't be able to touch these tax exemptions for 40 years. And this is after Ohio learned that they're losing over $1 billion in tax revenue this year as well, thanks to all these tax breaks for these data centers. There's an uprising happening, a populist uprising, and you're seeing it happening in Michigan, Maine, New York, and many other places in the country. The establishment figures still are not getting it, and they're hoping using the old ways of fooling the working class will continue working, like AIPAC running ads under a different name, touting Michigan's Democratic establishment Senate candidate Haley Stevens' work in the auto bailout. And, again, why would AIPAC care about the auto bailout? They don't care about the auto bailout. They're only about giving money to Israel. You see, in the past, that kind of dirty politics would work, but not anymore.
You're listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Have you ever heard Pat's lectures on why desserts with fruit aren't really desserts? Or why the 70s produced the greatest movies of all time? I have. So be happy you're just hearing him rant about politics. If you'd like to contact Pat about politics or debate how cocoa is technically a fruit, send a message to leftoflansing@gmail.com. Here's Pat Johnston.
Again, let me know what you think of Michigan's premier progressive podcast by emailing me leftoflansing@gmail.com. Time now for the Left of Lansing Last Call. As I said, my wife and I did some traveling over the weekend, and I noticed that there were less Trump signs in Western Pennsylvania than there were last year, which was interesting. But we did travel to D.C., so that way we could see her dad's grave at Arlington National Cemetery, and it was very moving, and it was the first time going back since he was interned there a few years back. He served in the Marines and went to Vietnam. And while he disagreed with my politics, I know that he told my wife that while he was no fan of Bill Clinton, particularly with Clinton's protesting of the Vietnam War, he said that Clinton at least stood for something, and at least he took a side, and he respected that. But as we walked around the cemetery, it felt different this time around for me. We visited JFK and RFK, and I could hear RFK's spirit crying due to his idiot son. We also visited some of the gravestones of a number of the Supreme Court justices, like Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But as we walked by so many of the graves of so many who gave their lives during World War II, Vietnam, Korea, like my great uncle, I kept reminding myself how dear leader Trump allegedly called all those men and women in those graves suckers and losers. And I wholeheartedly believe that he said that. Now, as for Vietnam, that was the greatest foreign policy disaster of the 20th century by far. And sadly, it appears to me that we just refuse to learn much from that disaster. But during that period, which divided a nation, divided towns, divided families, divided generations, dear leader Trump didn't seem affected by it one bit. He got a deferment due to bone spurs, allegedly, so he didn't have to serve. But now all of a sudden, he's the healthiest president in history. Now, look, I don't begrudge him for not serving if he couldn't, and I don't begrudge him if he was afraid of death and didn't want to go over there if he would have taken a stance. I despise that. I mean, I guess that's what I despise, is how the war did not affect Donald Trump whatsoever. He didn't advocate for the war, nor did he protest against the war. He stayed out of it, kept his hands clean. He just got his little deferment and went on his merry little way with daddy's money. And now, today, here he is playing war president. After, of course, saying that he wouldn't bring new wars. So from there, from D.C., we visited Gettysburg and took a 2-hour bus tour around the entire battlefield, which for me was also eerie. And I do want to go back and actually walk around the different places because I've never been there before, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But the battlefield was something to see, and it is an experience, especially when you get to stand on Little Round Top and then see the field for Pickett's last charge, where Confederate General Robert E. Lee basically sent his men into a slaughter machine. It was eerie. The tour guide was good and knew his stuff for certain. He really did a great job. But there was one part that I had trouble coming to terms with. The guide said that Lee didn't really want to harm civilians in Gettysburg, that he didn't believe in that. But then later told us that Lee and his men ransacked the town for food and supplies. Sounds to me that the Confederate Army harmed civilians. But whatever, I guess. But just looking over those fields and seeing all the statues amidst all this beauty in south central Pennsylvania, you come to terms that this is a battle that was inevitable since the nation's founding. Our founding fathers, many of them slaveholders, knew the issue of slavery would have to be dealt with by later generations. But as I looked at Gettysburg, my mind kept reminding me that even though, again, it's a beautiful area, thousands of men died because one side wanted to continue its practice of owning human beings. Whenever you come up on a MAGA Republican who claims the Civil War was about states' rights, you just respond by asking, states' rights to do what? You know what's astounding to me is how I see the Confederate flag flying or posted on houses or on cars right here in Michigan. That flag represented insurrection. It represented anti-Americanism. It represented racism. It represented slavery. But it astounds me to see the Confederate flag sometimes in Michigan, since Michigan was a Union state. In fact, the governor during the war, Austin Blair, was an ardent abolitionist, and he was able to gather half of the state's male population to sign up to fight in the Civil War. As a state senator from Eaton County, Austin Blair worked to pass Michigan's personal liberty law, guaranteeing personal liberty to all Michigan residents regardless of race, and he fought to nullify the Fugitive Slave Act here in Michigan. Austin Blair's statue, by the way, sits in front of the Michigan Capitol building, the same Capitol building where MAGA insurrectionists protested the Capitol building during COVID, with some, yes, carrying the Confederate flag. We saw similar displays of when MAGA Republican voters stormed the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th of 2021. You saw the pictures of those carrying the Confederate flag inside our nation's capital. But seeing Michiganders wave around the Confederate flag really drives me up the wall because they're not from the South. What the hell does the cause mean to them? Which is why the flag shows how it is just simply a racist flag. It has nothing to do with Southern heritage, and it sure as hell doesn't have anything to do with American heritage. It's about keeping a system in place, a system where white Americans, especially those with money, it keeps them in power. We see MAGA Republicans declaring war on DEI and renaming military sites. Oh, they'll find some other soldier from another war who had a similar name, who shared a same last name with Confederate names. So that way those sites still keep those Confederate names. And for a party and for a regime to be self-professed patriots, they certainly love celebrating those who try to tear this country apart. Secretary of Defense, or war, where the fuck he wants to call himself. That drunk loser, Pete Hegseth, a devout white Christian nationalist, is personally blocking the promotions of several black service members. The regime also eliminated a decades-long program designed to help black farmers throughout the country, as the regime deemed it DEI. That's happening in America today. Oh, and let's not forget about the Supreme Court's gutting of the Voting Rights Act. Because, oh yeah, that's right, they say racism is gone. That's happening in America today. The cause is still going on for some. And I'm supposed to hyperventilate because the possible next senator from Maine got a tattoo when he was young and didn't understand its ties to Nazism? I'm supposed to conflate that with how we're seeing outright fascism happening right now to eliminate American history and to especially eliminate the people of color and their history in this country? Sorry, I'm not doing that. Flag Day happens this Sunday, ironically, on the same day that dear leader Trump turns 80. And we're celebrating that with a UFC fight on the White House lawn because, why not? Treat everything like a show. Everything's a show. Still, I will put out my American flag on Flag Day, just as I do for the 4th of July, just as I do for Labor Day, do it also for Memorial Day. I've been asked why I do put my flag out in the age of Trump, and I respond that this is America. And I'm American, and this is my country. It's my country, too, and I'm going to show the colors in my attempt to protest this regime and this MAGA movement, which celebrates the Confederate flag, which celebrates insurrection, which celebrates fascism. I believe in the working class and the Progressive-Populist movement that helped make this country a little fairer for some last century. But as we've seen, moderation and centrism failed us as fascism took over and ripped apart the institutions that we thought would protect us in this country in the end. But now we're seeing how fragile those institutions truly were. I still wave the flag in hopes of becoming a more perfect union. Not perfect, but more perfect. They can't take that away from me. MAGA cannot take that away from me. They cannot wave the American flag and the Confederate flag at the same time and claim to be Americans. So yeah, I do fly my American flag, which leads me to my Left of Lansing web poll for the week. Do you still put out an American flag during the Trump regime if you oppose the Trump regime and the MAGA movement? You can vote yes or no. No gray area on that one. You can vote on my Twitter page. You can vote on Left of Lansing's YouTube page and also on Patreon.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Left of Lansing. Hey, breaking news today. The UAW reached a deal with General Motors supplier at American Axle in Three Rivers in West Michigan, ending the union's 10-day strike. And the highlight, at least $30 an hour for every worker who's on the floor. That's awesome. That is how you lift all boats. Coming up next week, State Senate candidate Kelly Van Ginhoven. I hope everyone's getting through these storms okay, which have been violent at times. But hey, you know what? It's good that climate change is a hoax, isn't it? Let's plug in more fossil fuels into the air, right? Until next time, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.